Welcome to the Athena Wellness Podcast, the show that invites you to take a seat around the community fire and listen to stories that inspire. I'm your host, Kathy Robinson, author, coach, and founder of Athena Wellness, a company that's dedicated to supporting you on your journey to live more wholeheartedly. Hello, and welcome to episode 59. Thanks so much for joining me. Today's show is a masterclass in what can happen when you override your inner wisdom and then what it's like to navigate the long road back into alignment with yourself. Our guest today is Bobbi Kahler, an entrepreneur and success coach who has worked with more than 3,000 clients focused on personal growth and transformation. She's also the author of Travels of the Heart, Developing Your Inner Leader, and the podcast host of UnYielded, Thriving No Matter What. Our discussion begins with Bobbi's own wellness journey. When her work ethic and high expectations severely impacted her health, Western medicine failed her, forcing her to seek integrative solutions. It's a fascinating story of exploration and ultimately recovery. And it's a story with a happy ending, because Bobbi is now a thriving athlete who helps others succeed in a balanced manner. We cover a range of topics, including the importance of trusting your inner voice, lessons and takeaways from the year 2020, why learn your way forward is a beneficial life approach, and how curiosity can be a superpower. We end this episode with our Dose of Inspiration segment, where Bobbi shares some of the things that are lighting her up these days. And as always, I'll put links to those items and Bobbi's website in the show notes. Bobbi is also offering the listeners of this podcast a 50% discount off her 6-week Bottleneck Breakthrough coaching program if you mention the Athena Wellness Podcast. Just visit her homepage, bobbikahler.com, and click on the Book a Call with Me Today button on the upper right-hand side. And this offer is good until August 15th, 2021. And now on to the show. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Bobbi, welcome to the Athena Wellness Podcast. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me as a guest, Kathy.
So please, share a bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, I am a success coach, and that means I work with people. Specifically, I work a lot with entrepreneurs, and I help them be successful in all the areas of their life that are important to them. Because very often as an entrepreneur, I know I fell into this trap, you can be successful in one area, typically your business, but some of the other areas kind of fall through the cracks.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really being intentional with what is the whole vision for our life and how do we go about creating that.
Perfect. And you have an interesting story about how you discovered integrative medicine. Could you share that with us, please?
Sure. Interesting is a good word for it. Life-threatening would be another one. I mentioned the whole thing about getting out of balance as an entrepreneur. So in 2000, I started my own business. In 2001, my husband and I moved to Portland, Oregon. And we were starting, we're kind of creating the business there. And by 2003, as an entrepreneur, you put a lot into your business. And it's easy to stop doing the things that you should be doing in terms of your health, and I didn't think that would ever happen to me, but it did. I mean, I went from someone I was an avid runner, and I didn't have time to go for a run, didn't have time to cook good food, didn't have time to get enough sleep, enough rest. And no matter how tired I was, I kept pushing through it. Because that's part of, it's like, well, I can push through anything. And sometimes that's a good thing. And in this case, it almost killed me. Because in 2003, March 6th, as a matter of fact, I collapsed. And by collapse, I mean, I could no longer brush my own teeth. I mean, I couldn't raise my forearm to brush my teeth. And that is when it finally occurred to me, you know what? You kind of have a problem. And I say that because what's sad about this is not listening to your body, because I would say it was a good 9 to 10 months leading up to this collapse where Kathy, it started with, I was super tired in the morning when I'd get up, but who isn't tired, So I'd haul myself into the shower, and then it was like, you know what, I'm kind of too tired to stand up while I'm taking a shower. So I'd sit down because I had to. And then it was, okay, so now when I'm putting my makeup on, I was too tired to stand. So I took a kitchen stool up to my bathroom and I'd sit on that, and that's how I put my makeup on. And then, and this was a slow progression. Had any of this happened overnight, you would have been freaked out. But because it was a slow progression, it's like, okay, well, I kept adapting. So at one point it was, okay, so after I put my makeup on sitting down, I needed to rest. I needed to go back to bed to rest before I could dry my hair, because I didn't have the energy to hold the hair dryer up. But it didn't occur to me. It just didn't occur to me. And then the thing with the brushing my teeth, I thought I was so clever because I could lean on the vanity, rest my elbows on the vanity. Yeah. I'm like, I can solve a problem. So I'd rest my elbows on the vanity, and all my weight would be resting on that as I'm sitting on that stool. And all I had to do was raise my forearm. And that's how I brushed my teeth until March 6th, when I made it to the bathroom. I was sitting on the stool. I put the toothpaste on the toothbrush, and I couldn't raise my forearm. So and that led to, doctors have told me they couldn't believe I was alive. One doctor said, you have like a 3% chance of a full recovery. And here was the thing. He was Western medicine. It was a university hospital. He was a very, very compassionate doctor. And talk about being a little it's not getting in, right? When he told me that, I said, okay, but when can I go for a run again? And he's like, you're not hearing me. He's like, Bobbi, he said, you might have to accept that your days of being an athlete are over.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, I understand I'm sick. I get, because that was 6 months in, 6 months after my collapse. And I thought, I understand I'm sick, but I'm not giving up on being an athlete. It is part of who I am. And at that point, he told me, he's like, Bobbi, he said, I don't think there's anything Western medicine can do for you, because there's no pill, there's no surgery.
Were they able to pinpoint what the issue was?
He believed it was something that they were studying at the time. And it happens to high performers, and we push ourselves beyond what we should be doing, and we collapse. So at that point, it's like, okay, well, because I'd never even heard of integrative medicine. I grew up in the Midwest. I thought, okay, well, now what? I am really in trouble. And so it was it was about 14 months after that, I finally found, she was a naturopath, and she was an integrative doctor. And she said, Bobbi, I've seen this. I've treated it. I can help you. And she said, it's not a fast recovery. It'll take 2 years, but I can help you. And that was one of the most hopeful days of the whole journey. And that's when, I hate needles. I'm using the word hate. And she's like, acupuncture is going to help. Massage therapy is going to help. I did hydrotherapy. She completely changed the way that I was eating. I wasn't getting enough protein in the morning. We changed that. Those 13x9 cake pans that we used to make the flat cakes? Yeah. I had a cake pan full of vitamins and supplements.
Wow.
That I had to start taking every day. And I can't swallow pills.
Wow.
So it was, my husband he was my boyfriend at the time. He had to break him up and crush him.
That's love.
We called it my vitamin cocktail because we had to mix it with grape juice, something that tasted terrible.
Wow.
But that's what I had to do. And so that's how I found integrative medicine.
Wow. I told you it was an interesting story, everybody.
Yeah.
You said a phrase about listening to your body, right? So obviously that has shifted. It's almost 20 years now. What is it that you think, was it just the business that precluded you from doing that back then? What do you think led up to that? Like now with hindsight?
Part of it was the business.
Yeah.
Part of it was also the core of who I am, because I had speech problems as a kid. And my mom worked very hard with me. And my core story around that became, you can do anything that you put your mind to, which is a fabulous core story, except it became a strength that I was overusing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget, Dr. McDonald was the name of the doctor who eventually helped me, one of the two integrative medicine doctors. And at one point I said to her, I'm like, okay, well, you just tell me what I need to do, because I can push through anything. And she just stopped and she looked at me and she said, Bobbi, that's what got you sick.
Right.
And what got you sick will not get you well. So part of it was, and the other thing, Kathy, is I was never taught to really tune into your body. Like, hey, everybody gets tired, buck up,
Mm-hmm.
And so it didn't occur to me that my body was trying to tell me something.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was a number of factors. And I was trying to, the other thing is, I'm a highly conscientious person. I'm very, very responsible. My husband, my boyfriend at the time, now husband, we were in this business together. So for me to say, you know what, I'm going to take a rest instead of working, felt like the height of selfishness.
Mm-hmm.
And now what I understand is, you know what, you can't take care of anybody else unless you're taking care of yourself.
Yeah, that's interesting. That comes down to discernment, right? Of
Mm-hmm.
you can't do everything, and we feel like we can when we have our own business. So, from a longer term perspective, then, and I love what got you sick won't get you well. I think that was really, it sums it all up, right? So
it really does.
You had to relearn how to approach your life. You still have the business. It's more successful than ever. So what changed in your approach to wellness then, so you could have long-term sustainability?
Yeah. Well, part of it, and I'll tell you, when she said that to me, that might have been the scariest day of the whole thing. And this was a 10-year journey, fully
Oh,
back to
wow.
health.
Okay.
Yeah, because the first 5 years it was getting back to, I call that chapter 1, getting back to a stable place where I was no longer sick. Unfortunately, when I finally got the clean bill of health, like, oh, your numbers are within normal, I was about 10, maybe 20% of the well person I used to be, the healthy, strong athlete. So then it took 5 years to regain that. So that's part of it. But as far as what changed, the day that she said that to me, what got you sick won't get you well, I was like, you just took away my signature strength in life.
Mm.
And if I don't have that, what do I have? And that was scary. That was the scariest day. That was scarier than the day I collapsed in a doctor's office and like my blood pressure dropped to such a point they couldn't find it anymore. I mean, so I had to learn, okay, how do I maybe not fight my way through everything? How do I learn to adjust? How do I learn to, when I'm tired, take a break? And I didn't learn that well very quickly because I kind of kept pushing for a while. And it got to a point, this was in 2005. It was June of 2005, maybe June 20th, that I had another really bad relapse. And we were getting married in August of that year. And Dr. Barb said to me, she said, let me make this simple for you. She goes, unless you quit your business, you will not be alive to see your wedding. And it was interesting because it was both sad and it was like, whoa, this was big. It was also a bit of a relief because it took away that ultra conscientiousness, because now my job was to take care of myself.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So things like that. And over the years, I think it's now paying attention. When I'm tired, I notice it very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say, you know what, I'm going to go take a rest. I still get massages on a regular basis because I know that helps with, it supports your adrenal glands. It helps you stay healthier. And I do not skip I'm going to say workouts, but they're not really workouts. They're fun, right? Because I love cross-country skiing. I love paddleboarding. I love biking. I love hiking. Today I went out on the lake paddleboarding and I saw 2 different moose. It was amazing. But that's part of my wellness.
Yes.
Nature rejuvenates me. I mean, we live at 9,000 feet and that's not by accident because I know that's what replenishes my soul. I have to manage my stress. I mean, then of course, the way we eat is I'm not saying I never have a snack, because my weakness is tortilla chips. I'll just be really honest. Who doesn't love tortilla chips and salsa? But those are treats.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about food now as fuel for how am I fueling my body. So I don't know, Kathy, if I answered your question.
It's a great conversation. What I love is this idea of redefining. You had to redefine who you are. I mean,
yes,
the thrust behind everything you did was taken away.
Yeah.
And it's like, who am I? So as you're physically getting stronger, you had to remake yourself.
Yeah.
What was that process like? And then how did that feed into your business, which it sounds very much like came out of this whole experience?
Yeah. One of the things I did, because it was scary, because I used to, before getting sick, every day I'd wake up and I think, oh, like I would have, a loose leaf piece of paper with a to-do list, because I could do it.
Mm-hmm.
Once I got sick, and once it became obvious, like, oh, this isn't something that's going to go away in a couple of days, I started a practice that I continue to this day. And it is, if I can only do one thing today, what should that be? And it's amazing, because all the other stuff that isn't nearly as important falls off the list.
Mm-hmm.
So that was part of it. And then I think learning how to rely on others, that was something else I had to do. And that wasn't easy, because I've always been extremely self-reliant. But yet it feels good when you find those people you can rely on. I mean, those were really the major ones, and just really kind of tuning in more. But now, obviously I've started I'd say we put the business on pause in 2005, because it was not something I ever really gave up on, but it was like, we have to take a serious break. And now it's, it's probably stronger than ever. Well, it is stronger than ever, and I'm stronger than ever, but it's that intentionally taking care of myself so that I can take care of others. When I was basically trapped in bed for however long that was, and it was years, I couldn't help anybody else. And that was a major shift in my perspective. So like today, when I went out for my paddleboard, I don't consider that was a selfish act. That was self-care. And it's so that I can be prepared and healthy and come from strength, so I can be there for others.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. I think we probably have similar clientele, which is the type A. And for me, it's more corporate type, because that's where I come from. And people who are leaving that, you have more of the overworked entrepreneur.
Yep.
It's a really hard thing when they're not collapsing to counsel people in this way. So if we have listeners out there who recognize themselves in your story and say, much like you did, I don't have the time to not do this, or I can't, what might be some small steps or some ways to avoid this incredible experience that you've been through?
Yeah. I would say trusting your inner voice, right? When you're tired. And here's the thing too, trusting your inner voice and not letting the voices of others be louder than that inner voice. Because I remember when I was sick, before the collapse, like leading up to it, and even after I collapsed, people would say to me, everybody gets tired. That's right. There's tired, and then there's you can't lift your head up off the pillow. So trust that voice that's telling you you might need a rest. And here's the thing, it doesn't have to be a 2-week vacation, right? How do you build that into your everyday? I don't care if it's 10 minutes, 20 minutes for yourself. If it's taking a latte on your back porch, that's my new thing. I make myself a latte and I go to the back porch and I for 10 minutes, that's my time. So I think some of those small steps, I think sometimes people think it has to be big, like we have to go to a spa or we have to go to a retreat. Those are great. Think about how you integrate it into your everyday life, and do we really, here's another thing. Do we really need to be on call 24/7? Is the world really going to come to an end? Like this was, last fall, the company I work with, I partner with a company with some clients. They're on the East Coast. And so a lot of my clients were on the East Coast, but I'm like, well, when I get up at 7, I should be checking my email before I do anything else. Like, I'm not even out of bed and I'm checking my email. You know what? Probably there's nothing in my inbox that can't wait an hour, because if it's that important, they should be calling me. So what I did, and plus I wanted time to write. And so I reached out to my teammates and I said, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm not going to check my email until 9:00 my time. However, if something comes up that you need an immediate response to, call me on my cell. And no one complained. And you know how many calls I've gotten? 0. And everyone else is like, you know what? That's a really good practice. I'm going to start that too. And the other thing that I've done over the years is my work email, I don't look at it after 5 or 6. Some, it depends on if, unless I've got something going on with someone where they need a response from me, like we're going back and forth on something like that. But that's another thing, so how do you make it into your everyday life versus, oh, this is something for someday, or it has to be really big or whatever. It doesn't. This is your life. And how are you taking care of you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's from what you're saying, it's really coming down to boundaries and communicating those boundaries, right?
Mm-hmm.
And intentionality.
Yes.
Right. So listening to that voice of what do you really need and being able to put some parameters in that gives you that, and not at the impact of anybody else or the expense of anybody else when you're communicating it appropriately.
That's right.
I think that's wonderful advice.
The boundaries are huge.
Yeah.
And I was surprised. There were a few people along the way, not anybody that I worked with, but friends, put in air quotes. Like I remember it was a 4th of July barbecue that someone was having. And this was when I was in a state of, this was right after the doctor told me, like, you better quit your business or you won't be alive to see your own wedding. And I woke up on the 4th of July because I really wanted to go to her barbecue. But I woke up with a raging migraine, and I could barely sit up. And Rick said to me, he's like, are you really up for going to a picnic? And I said, no, but I don't want to let somebody down. And he's like, if she's your friend, she's not going to feel let down. She would feel like you need to take care of yourself, which is probably what you would feel. That's what I would feel towards someone. Unfortunately, this person didn't. She said, well, I'm terminating our friendship. And I thought, then it probably wasn't that good of a friendship. It's easier to say that now, almost 20, 15, 16 years later. That was painful at the time. I think what I had to accept is that doesn't mean anything was wrong with me or my decision. Maybe doesn't mean anything was wrong with her. We just weren't a fit. And that's okay.
Yeah.
So really giving yourself that permission that you need to do what's best for you, and it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the right people will support you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you find that sometimes when you change your lifestyle. So going into a more healthy lifestyle, the people that you were less healthy with, let's just call it, you're not as much fun with them anymore, and vice versa.
That's right.
Like things go on and there's a natural parting. So
there is.
Very, very helpful. I always like to get some thoughts on this past year. What are you seeing and hearing with your clients? What have their big lessons and takeaways been?
I think one of the biggest things that's come up is, things obviously shifted. And so people had to change the way they were doing things. So they fell into one of two camps. There were the people who are like, I'm just going to wait for things to go back to normal. And then those who said, you know what, I need to adapt. And it's funny because right after the pandemic, when it started, I think I was coaching, it was a whole group of managers I was coaching. It was in May. And I had, I don't know, probably 40 of them out of the 70 that I coach on a quarterly basis. 40 of them said, I'm kind of waiting. And I thought, let's see how long you're going to wait, because I don't think this is going back to normal anytime soon. By August, most of those 40 were like, okay, we've got to adapt. So it's that adapt mindset. Okay, so something's changed. I have to adapt. The second piece of that is that it's been kind of I'm going to say a great chance for people to look at what are the strengths they have right now, right before the pandemic hit. And then how do I build on those and extend those into new areas? So a super simple example, one of the managers I was talking with, he's also responsible for sales. His name's Mike. He's up in Alaska. And he's like, Bobbi, he goes, I've never had to sell over the phone. And he said, I'm used to walking into businesses. Can't walk into businesses anymore. And he's like, I'm lost. I have no idea how to sell. And I'm like, things have changed. You still understand the basic process, right? You have to have a conversation. You need to do discovery. You need to learn what they need. You need to learn, can I help them? You need to talk about what you do in a way that makes sense. It's the same process. How you are doing it has changed. And he's like, oh, okay. And so I think that for people to see, like, how is their skill set being extended was really important. The other important distinction, and this also came with Mike, but I've seen this countless times, is people at first they're like, I'm not comfortable, therefore I'm not good at it. Those are two separate things. When we're learning something new, we are often uncomfortable. I think about like the cross-country skiing. There are times when I go out because I love it. But again, I come from the Midwest. So like living here in the Rockies, when I'm going down something steep, it's scary. But even though I'm uncomfortable going down it, doesn't mean I'm actually not good at it. And it doesn't mean I'm not learning. And more importantly, that's usually when I grow the most, even if I fall.
Mm-hmm.
My husband always says this about skiing because he grew up skiing. So of course, this is easy for him to say. But he's like, if you're not falling occasionally, you're not pushing yourself hard enough. You know what I mean? And now he does wait until I get on my skis before he says that to me. But I think it's a great lesson. And I'm seeing more and more people kind of embrace that. Like, hey, and that's kind of what the pandemic gave a lot of people. It was that grace to fall. Like, hey, this is something brand new. I remember I'd never done, I shouldn't say never. Well, I'd never used Zoom to do a workshop. I had used WebEx in the past, but very sporadically. Most of my training was in person. Most people understood, the first few times you do training over Zoom, there's a learning curve. And I think we all had that feeling of we're in this together. So I think people gave themselves more of that grace to say, I might fall, but I'm going to learn and I'm going to grow. And that's what I love about it.
Yeah. I was calling it social cover, meaning that everybody was kind of in their own little hubs and there was some time to figure stuff out. And I love that word grace.
Yeah.
Because suddenly we were seeing common humanity.
Yes.
We were seeing toddlers running through the Zoom screen and all kinds of things. And it's just like real people, right? It wasn't the work mask anymore. It was like, look, this is what's going on. And I think there was a lot of empathy.
Yeah.
Beyond the professional empathy that hopefully we extend to each other, which I think is really amazing. I'm wondering if you saw the difference between your entrepreneurial clients and your corporate clients, because it feels to me that entrepreneurs by nature are more comfortable with growth and with uncertainty. And the corporate types, and I'm on both sides of this equation now.
Yep.
But in my corporate life, it's like you don't want to rock the boat. You want to execute and deliver, and anything that gets in the way of that is seen as, it's like danger.
That's right.
So have you seen that?
I would agree. I think entrepreneurs in general they know that they have to, because if you've been in business for a year, how many times do you have to adapt? I mean, everything, you're constantly adapting. The other thing I'd say, it's really interesting when you ask me that, some of the managers I work with within the corporate world, the ones who were, I'm going to say, they jumped more quickly, and I think they became successful more quickly, had more of the entrepreneurial mindset. Like, you know what? Hey, I've got to take responsibility for this. This is what we're doing. But in general, yeah, I would say the entrepreneurs were a bit more adaptive right from the beginning. They have to be.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what comes out of this on both sides. There's opportunity here, right? And there's innovation because we have to do things differently, and what actually changes in the wake of all of this.
Yeah. I think it's an exciting time, actually, to see what happens as we come out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
you've got a wonderful phrase of learning your way forward. So it seems like it's very applicable in these times. So what's the origin of that, and how did that become part of your approach?
That is, the origin. I think that's something that has just been a part of my story, like forever. I mentioned how I had the really bad speech problems as a kid. I actually had a speech pathologist. He told my mom when I was 6, he's like, she's never going to talk correctly. She'll have, a lifelong disability and all this kind of stuff. Luckily, my mom's like, yeah, we're not listening to that. And so she worked with me. And then when I was in the 8th grade, I decided I'm going to take a speech class when I go to high school because I still had speech problems and I hated speaking in public. And my speech teacher, luckily, his name was Mr. Jordan. He was also the coach for the speech and debate team. And after my first speech, which was a complete and absolute train wreck, and I'm not being hard on myself, it was terrible. He asked me if I could stay after class. And I thought, oh my God, I've done so bad. He's going to kick me out of the class. But he didn't. He said, would you consider joining the speech and debate team? And I thought, I even asked him, I said, you were in the room for that speech because it was awful. And he just smiled and he's like, yeah, it wasn't very good. But he said, you have potential. And he said, I believe if we work together, he said, you could become successful. He said, because you've got great raw ingredients, the rest we can learn. And I think, Kathy, that when I think about it, it probably started there. So learn your way forward to me is putting yourself in the game and saying, I'm going to learn what I need to learn along the way. And this is something that I've helped my clients with a lot in coaching, right? Because we all have a place where we are and a place we want to get to. So this is just about learning anything we need, we can learn, right? Whether that's skills, behaviors, mindsets, knowledge, we can learn what we need to learn. And I passionately believe in that. I've coached more than 3,000 people. I know this to be true. I don't know a lot in life, but I know this to be true. and there's 3 steps to it. And it's the AAA, right? So the first one is act. We have to take an action. If we don't take an action, we can't learn anything. And the second one is to assess, right? So we take an action and then we assess it. How did that go? Did it go as I anticipated? Did anything go sideways? Is there anything that in the future I'd want to do differently? And then the third A is to adapt. What do I want to change? And sometimes it's like, hey, you know what? I'm not going to change anything. I'm going to keep trying this and continue to watch it. And when I think about learn your way forward, I think about it in terms of have the curious mindset that you'd have in a laboratory, right? Instead of the pressure of, I have to get this right. No, you're learning. The curious mindset of someone who's just exploring and who's curious about what they're doing and how it's working takes so much pressure away from us. It allows us to show up differently, and it allows us to really embrace the learning. So that's what I mean by learn your way forward.
I love that. And I think that curiosity by nature then allows people to be a little self-compassionate as they go through this, which keeps that cycle going of act and assess and adapt.
That's right.
Over and over again, right? To be able to refine the skills.
Yeah. And the other thing about curiosity, which makes it so important, and this is something I had to take neuroscience as part of my grad school. Thank goodness it wasn't a lot, but something that really stuck out to me. And I remember this: we cannot feel both curiosity and judgment at the same time. So think about that. If we're being curious, we're not judging ourselves. Oh, you're stupid, or you're, whatever. We're just being curious. It also applies when we're coaching other people. If we're being curious about their behavior, we're not judging their behavior. And it's tremendously powerful because we're our own worst critics. So anything we can do to kind of tame that voice, the better.
Agreed. Yeah, that's wonderful advice. I love it. Act, assess, adapt, and do so with curiosity. Beautiful.
Yes.
Beautiful. Well, Bobbi, we like to wrap up these episodes with something that we call a dose of inspiration. And you've already shared some of your wellness practices and some of your struggles. So what have you read or listened to lately that you think our audience might enjoy?
Wow. There's a few things that come to mind. There's an app, and I just discovered it, called Healthy Minds. And it's put together by neuroscientists, it's researchers. And it is a fabulous app that you get it every day. And some of them are meditations, and some of them explain the science behind some of these like awareness principles. And the thing I really love about it too, is they both have for the meditation, because I'm one of these people, it's hard to sit still, surprisingly enough. So there's an active meditation, like if you're out for a walk or if you're paddleboarding or whatever that might be. And there's also a seated meditation, and you can pick, is it 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever. So you can start small and work your way up. And I have found that to be just incredible. And I just love the awareness stuff. Like, once a day, I'm going to stop what I'm doing and I'm going to tune into, what am I hearing? What am I seeing? What's around me? I love that app. I love
I'm
it.
going to check that out myself. That sounds
It's
wonderful.
wonderful.
That's
Yeah.
great. Anything else that you, from a listening or a reading perspective?
I'm reading a few books right now. Oh, I just finished one by Aaron Sanchez, who's the chef,
Mm-hmm.
and it's called Where I Come From. And at first I thought it was a place, but it's really more where he comes from in his heart. So I loved that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm reading a book right now called Elevate, and I forget who the author is, but it's a good book. Just about how do we elevate ourselves in our experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then someone recommended Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey.
Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Have you read that book?
I have. Yeah.
I think I read 100 pages the other night. I couldn't put it down. I didn't really expect to like the book, but it's interesting. It's just a very interesting book.
Yeah, I love that when that came out, it hit like #1 in spirituality. And that is not what you would expect when you pick up a book from Matthew McConaughey, but he is a wise gentleman. Yes.
Yeah. Just very like, wow. I found it just captivating. And I was tired. I wanted to put it down and stop reading. I couldn't. There you go.
Excellent. I'll put links to those in the show notes. That's wonderful. What new thing or experience are you looking forward to trying?
Well, it's an extension of what I love. I know it's like late June, but I'm already thinking about cross-country ski season. I'm a few months away. So I'm thinking about, okay, what are the new runs I want to do? Where are some new ski places that I haven't been before? So it's kind of an extension of something I love. Cross-country skiing is my happy place.
I'll tell you, I'm a fairly athletic person. That's one of the hardest things. I mean, I do CrossFit and like no problem. I was there this morning, but to get on cross country skis, that's no joke.
It's no joke.
Especially at 9,000 feet.
Yeah. The last year I was really disappointed. We had a bad snow season. I only made it out 77 times. The season before I made it to 97. I'm like, I want to hit 100. So that's my goal.
Got it. That's good. That's good. Well, I wish you an early winter.
Thank you.
It's great. Envision the perfect road trip. Where do you go? What do you do?
Okay. That's hard because the best road trip that I've ever taken, we had a vague idea of where we were going. And every day it was like, what do we want to do today? What do we want to see today? So I think if I were doing another road trip, I would kind of like that approach to it. But some that come to mind. Ooh, a road trip around cross-country skiing. Surprise, surprise. Another thing.
Great, I love it.
Yeah. I mean, that would be awesome with my 2 dogs and my husband. Another thing I'd love to do, and this has always been something I've wanted to do, is to go to the Northeast in the fall to see the autumn colors and combine that with a biking trip, because that's our other real passion is, road cycling. I don't know how we're gonna do that with the dogs, but maybe I'll figure that out at some point.
That's great. I actually did a Vermont cycling in October, and it was unbelievable. Yeah, highly recommended. I love that.
Yeah.
What has you feeling inspired these days?
Okay, this might sound weird, but here we go.
All good.
About, I don't know, 4 weeks ago, I really made a commitment to carving out more margin for myself because, I can tend to run a little bit at the red line, and it's been very intentional and I love it. Like I said, 10 minutes out on the back porch with a latte. But just having more margin, it allows me to do more of the things that I love. Like I love cooking. I love, I don't have a garden because the deer and the elk and the moose eat anything I put in the yard, but I have 3 decks and they're all decked out with all these flowers. In my neighborhood, I'm known as a flower lady, but actually having the time to plant the flowers, to be intentional with it, to tend them, to water them. That is just, I don't know. It's just, I don't know. It's feeding me somehow. I don't know if it's lighting me up, but it's feeding me.
You fill in the tank.
It's filling the tank.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. You're practicing what you preach. That's very impressive.
It's not always easy, but man, has it been great. Now it's getting easier.
And then lastly, what has you feeling optimistic about the future?
I would say if the challenges of my past have taught me anything, it's to be confident and optimistic about the future. It goes to that Winston Churchill quote, and I always butcher the quote a little bit, but it's essentially, the future may be unknowable, but the past should give us hope. And I think, last October we had the big fires come through, and it was an emergency evacuation, 198,000 acres gone. 28 of our neighbors lost their homes. Our house was saved. But that night when we had evacuated, it was hard to get to sleep. And I thought, wait a minute, are you saying that this is the challenge? This is going to be the thing that you can't overcome? And I thought, nope. If the challenges of my past have taught me anything, I know I can overcome this. And it was with that thought that I found peace and I went to sleep. So that's what always makes me optimistic about the future, is just that trust and confidence that I can make it through.
All right. That's great. That's wonderful. I'm sure our listeners will want to get in touch, Bobbi. What's the best way for them to be able to do that?
Probably through my website. It's just bobbikahler.com. They can learn more about me there. They can find my podcast. They can contact me there. And I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn. It's just Bobbi Kahler. There's not very many Bobbi Kahlers out there.
Very good. And I'll link that up, all that stuff up in the show notes as well. Well, it was a really beautiful conversation, Bobbi. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I loved it.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I know there are many ways you can spend your time. Thank you for choosing to spend it with me. Until our paths cross again, be kind to yourself and show your warrior spirit some love. If you know anyone who could benefit from today's episode, please pass it on. And many thanks for supporting the show by subscribing and leaving a review. It means a lot, and it helps others find their way to our circle. If you'd like to access the show notes, have a question you'd like addressed on a future episode, or would like a transcript of this episode, visit www.athenawellness.com/podcast. Until next time, be well.